Hi, glad you're chaplain, and yes, I am glad to be your chaplain. Major Glad Young Home, chaplain to Salisbury House, Lifehouse, hostel for homeless people in St Helens. A job that I thoroughly enjoy and have just gained so much from the people that I've worked with and shared life with in lots of ways. It's Monday night. Today, normally the first Monday in May, would be a bank holiday, but this year it's been changed to Friday. And I've been so behind with the times that I didn't even realise until recently that the bank holiday had been changed because of the celebrations within our country that will come on Friday. But in some ways it's a bit like life at the moment. Everything just rolls into one day is much the same as the other. But earlier I took a few moments out and I was in our back garden and I looked around me and I felt the warmth of the sun. I looked at the lilac tree hanging over our garden from next door, the beautiful blue sky, heard the birds sing and watched Bramwell jump as he went for the ball. It's the small things that count, the small things that make us smile, the small things that make our life different. And so tomorrow, I challenge you to go about and see what it is that is the small things that bless your life. Something that you see, something that you hear, something that you taste, something that you smell, something that you touch. Look for those 5 blessings in your life tomorrow. We come to our book again tonight, Max the Miracle Dog by Kerry Irving. We're on chapter 4 now, and as I read it, we will hear background music, selected music of Salvation Army music. Sit back, relax, enjoy. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Chapter 4, Into the Wild. One day, when I was 13, my dad summoned me round to his place. It was unusual for him to want to see me beyond our agreed visits. And even when I did spend time there, his only interest wasn't in talking to me, but mocking my stepdad. I just knew something was up. "I'm moving away," he told me soon after I arrived, and placed his arm around my stepmother. "We're emigrating to Australia." "Oh," was all I could say in response. Right. I felt no sense of elation or relief that would spell an end to the fear of my own father. Just then, I wasn't sorry to see him go either. After years of putting up barriers so I couldn't be hurt, I just looked at him blankly. I nodded as he explained that life just hadn't been the same since rolling the van, but felt nothing at all. "We'll be having a going away party," he said, like this was going to make everything better. "I hope you can join us." Once the news had sunk in, I started to think that I would miss him. I associated the outbursts of anger and the threat of punishment with the smell of alcohol on his breath. But that wasn't a permanent state. When my dad wasn't drinking, I reminded myself, he could be all right. We shared the same sense of humour at times. I felt like he really cared for me. Sober, He would talk to me on a level, as if he recognised that I was no longer a kid. While his older sons were long gone, it struck me that this was his way of making up for lost time. In fact, as he made his preparations to pack up and begin a new life, he began to look ahead with me in mind. "One day, perhaps you can join me," he said. "I'll have a business up and running. We can work together, and when I'm gone, it will be all yours." As someone with no clear goals, or even a belief that I could be ambitious, this sounded like an invitation that I couldn't ignore. Dad stressed that now was not the right time to be taking me with him, and beside, the custody terms prevented any such move halfway across the world. All the same, he made a solemn promise that when the right opportunity presented itself, I could join him on the other side of the world in making a fresh start. My mum, of course, interpreted his offer very differently. She saw it as a direct provocation, a means of disrespecting all the hard work she'd done in raising me. My mum refused outright to let me discuss his proposal with her. In fact, she even forbade me from going to his leaving party. That really upset me. Despite living in fear of my dad for so long, I wanted to believe that he'd changed. Compared to the way I viewed my stepdad, I was always looking for chinks of light in the picture I painted of my dad. He was quite the showman when he wanted to be. He could make people laugh or talk things up to fully engage them. I always held out hope that he could peel away the drinking and the behaviour that went with it, like a villain's suit that was no longer needed. It could be that easy, or so I thought, for him to reveal the man that I wished for him to be. After the offer had been made, I figured his farewell party would have been my chance to restore a relationship as father and son before the time came when we could be together again. By then, however, my mother was so enraged by his decision to just fly away and leave us that final word on the subject, drove a wedge between us. "You're just like him," she snapped at once. "Good for nothing and useless." "Well, maybe I am," I raged back at her, and I meant it. Not only was I my father's son, I just didn't feel like I was capable of shining at anything. By now, my grades had flatlined, while my brothers had gone to grammar school. I just wasn't good enough to follow in their footsteps. They used to joke and call me thick, and I took it to heart. For me, the classroom was a place where I could sit in quiet confusion and simply tune out. Maths was a casing point and just undermined my self-confidence even further. I enjoyed lessons like geography and look forward to playing sports like rugby because that meant being part of a team. Even so, as the terms ticked by, I came to accept that I would never be academically minded. The only subjects that I showed any glimmer of hope in were practical ones like metalwork and woodwork. I found that I was quite good at putting things together and by extension taking them apart to see how they worked. I liked breaking things down into component parts, especially if something wasn't working properly. Unfortunately, I never thought to do the same with myself, and figure out what was essentially making me so unhappy. Instead, I carried on finding ways to lock my feelings out so that nobody knew what was going on inside my heart and my head and my mind. As a teenager, it was girls who came close to finding a way in. While I struggled to trust anybody with my emotions, I enjoyed going on dates with someone I liked, that we could get to know each other a bit better. At the same time, it wasn't me who eventually shut down on them. It was my stepfather who ensured that any blossoming romance would be killed off with a single visit to my house. If I invited a girl back for tea, proud as punch that someone would be interested in me, he would just basically blank her off completely. Even if I walked in to find him in a good mood, his face would fall as soon as he saw that I had female company. He wouldn't look around, even after I had introduced her and she had made efforts to talk to him. I wanted to die of embarrassment. It was as if my stepfather had spotted a chance for me to be happy and killed it stone dead. As a result, any blossoming romance I might have with a girl just ended with an excuse to go home early and then distancing from me because, frankly, my stepfather was toxic. Over the years, his attitude towards me didn't soften one bit. Even when I was a young man, he still set about threatening and intimidating me in the same way that he had when I was a bewildering little boy. When my dad's propensity to reach for his belt had tapered as I developed, and he'd begun to talk to me rather than tell me off, my stepfather considered my growing physical presence to be a direct threat to his authority. With his ever-tightening rules, constant gripes and threats, he let me feel as if I was taking up too much space in the house and effectively eating away through the food budget. Being older, with little more independence, I just found more reasons to stay out of his orbit, which is where the Army Cadet Force came to my rescue. I joined up because it was something a lot of my friends had done. The idea of being out in the fresh air twice a week, toying with rifles and tents, certainly appealed to me. Plus, I thought it might help me make new friends. I just hadn't anticipated that it would be so fulfilling. Within a short space of time, I was attending not only to fit in, but because I loved every aspect of the experience. Every session was an opportunity for me to join young people who shared a similar love of being outdoors. We wore the same uniform, so everyone was equal, in a disciplined but fun environment in which rules were something to be respected, not feared. As cadets, we were given the opportunity to master new skills and supported in this by both leaders and peers. We went on several training exercises and shared experiences that really helped me to come out of my shell. Quite simply, for the very first time in my life, I found I had a family. It felt like I belonged, and I was welcomed in that tribe. I suppose I came to appreciate this more than most because it was something that I'd never truly experienced before. It certainly pointed me towards a career in the army, which I considered seriously for quite a while. What stopped me was the fact that any sense of purpose the cadets gave me was just drained away from me whenever I headed for home. Without fail, my stepfather would take one look at me breezing back through the door in my uniform and set out to remind me just who was in charge. I might have been too noisy coming in, or brought mud in on my boots. One way or another, he would pick a quarrel with me and quickly escalate it. He used to enjoy watching the wrestling on television, with theatrical bouts between fighters with names like Giant Haystacks, Big Daddy and Kid Dynamo. I don't know whether he saw himself in those guys, but given the opportunity, he'd pounce on me. It began when the wrestling time was on. I'd been sitting beside him on the side of the sofa, tuned out from his running commentary about how he could do better, when suddenly he turned his attention on me. It was just play fighting, or so he said, but I didn't feel like it from the start. Grinning at my protests, as if I'd reached an age when this kind of thing was acceptable. He twisted my arm behind my back, or pinned me to the ground as if we were in the ring. Then slowly, over time, the idea of fun and games became a means of putting me in my place. "Kerry, you're late," he said to me one time as I returned home from cadets. My stepfather was in the front room, his attention turned from whatever he'd been watching on the box. I just closed the front door behind me, and I was well aware of the time because my curfew had yet to begin. "It's not quite 8 o'clock, I said, and that was enough to bring him to his feet. "Look at you," he said, sizing me up and down. I was so proud of my cadet uniform, from my boots to my beret. It gave me a sense of identity that had nothing to do with living in this house. Army boy. The way he levelled his gaze at me made me feel like he just declared the start of a bout. All of a sudden, I felt quite alone. I glanced into the kitchen and up the stairs, and there was no sight or sound of Mum. I guessed she was out on her late night walk with Prince. It was just me and him in the house. The realisation made me want to reach for the door and walk right out again, but it was too late for that. "What are you watching?" I said, hoping to distract him as I ducked around him from the front room. "Hey!" My stepfather grabbed me forcefully by the scruff of my shirt and squared me round to face him. "Come on," he bellowed, practically nose to nose. "Don't they teach you to fight?" Before I could draw breath to remind him that the cadets wasn't about hand-to-hand combat, he grabbed me in a headlock. "Get off!" I yelled. "Leave me alone!" Trapped under his arm, I felt just as gripped by shock and sheer humiliation. Even though I'd grown, he was still bigger than me and just laughed when I struggled. I pleaded with him to let go, only for him to urge me to fight back like a man. "Do it, Kerry. Prove yourself to me. Show me what you're made of." If he considered this to be a lark, I wasn't laughing in any way. I had a great evening with the cadets, only to come back to this. If anything, it just trampled on my belief that I could be good enough to join the army. If I couldn't deal with my stepfather, I thought to myself, what use would it be? Then, as I flailed and threshed around in that sense of helplessness, and turned to anger. In that moment, for the first time ever, I'd had enough. All I wanted to do was show him that I could push him and that he couldn't push me around anymore. I tried to swing him against the wall, but my stepfather just picked up on it. Is that the best you can do? Is it? Is it? I wanted to lay that bastard on his back, but he simply had me pinned. Bent double, with my head trapped, he shifted his weight from one foot to another to keep me contained. It gave me one more shot to break free. Then, choking back the tears, I submitted. It felt so pointless to me just then, and summed up exactly how I felt about my life. For the more I struggled, desperate to be free, my stepfather just tightened his grip on me. End of chapter 4. Quite a tough chapter and might have brought about lots of emotions and thoughts and feelings of your own life, as it has me with mine in some ways. But before I conclude, I want to turn back to this little box of hope that I shared with you last night and read just one of the cards to you. Hope says you are loved, you have a purpose, you belong, you have a choice, you are needed. And the verse of scripture on the back of the card is the verse that we have painted in our prayer room on the orange painting that Samantha Hamilton painted for us a few years ago. This night, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of his Holy Spirit. A verse from Romans 15 and verse 13. Good night. God bless you. Love you with all my heart. Speak to you again soon. Bye.